Poppy, the story I have for you this week is called The Missing Pilot.
Ooh.
Well, we did people surviving various boat sinkings last week, and we have done bits and bobs to do with bodies. This is a kind of transport meets missing corpse tale.
Two of my favourite things. I mean, I'm kind of hoping that the plane isn't involved, because obviously whenever you hear these stories and then you get on a flight, one can get a little bit nervous.
Yes.
But I'm guessing, well, I don't want to spoil it.
No. Well, it's old enough. It's old enough, so you won't necessarily. Well, I'll get to that in a moment, because that will somewhat give it away. I've just come back from Bruges, where I've been at a wedding. Rewatched In Bruges on the way there. 10 out of 10 film.
Perfect.
It's a near perfect film. It's a near perfect film.
The ending's so good.
And we recreated the photo of pretending to be Brendan Gleeson falling out of the belfry in the main square. Top laughs. And it was a fabulous wedding in Bruges. Bruges is such a weird sort of, obviously in the film in Bruges, it's all very misty and romantic.
Gothic-y, yeah.
Yeah, but also because it's winter, so it's sort of cozy. Whereas this is in the middle of a European heat wave, where it's just full of baking tourists and just these enormous squares where they just try to shovel fries into your face.
I was going to say, was it fries and mayonnaise as the main dinner for the wedding?
Well, there were fries at the wedding.
Of course,
because one half of the couple was it is Flemish. It's a 10 out of 10 for wedding food.
Absolutely.
But actually, it's sort of got a little bit to do with the story I have for you this week, because I was thinking about the story and wrote all my bits and bobs, and then went to Bruges and I thought, oh gosh, I'm sort of in that kind of territory. So shall I get cracking?
Yeah, let's get on with it. I'm ready.
So it is May 1940. If that gives anything away as to do with what was happening with planes.
Was there something big going on in the world? Okay. Right, so we're a year into World War II.
Exactly. And we are not over Belgium, but we are in northern France. And the skies of northern France in May 1940 were absolute chock-a-block, Poppy, because obviously World War II was underway. At this point in 1940, the British Army is retreating, so towards Dunkirk. This is ahead of Dunkirk, famously Dunkirk, where they did that massive retreat back over the channel. Yeah. That was in June 1940. And the Luftwaffe were having a great old time picking off RAF pilots one by one as they were flying various sorties over France. On the 19th of May, 12 Hurricanes, so 12 RAF fighter jets were shot down in a single day. And one of them was piloted by a 27-year-old from Great Ayton in North Yorkshire. His name was George Morley Fiddler. That's what, my other sort of title for this was going to be Fiddler in the Sky, as opposed to Fiddler on the Roof.
That. But Fiddler, unfortunately, does have a slightly paedophile connotation.
It does. And actually, who's scrolling?
It's a shame for people playing violin all over the world. But
doesn't make for a very clinical title.
Or maybe it does. But I was just going to say, for our American listeners, you are a Yorkshireman, are you?
Well, I straddle a border, North Nottinghamshire, South Yorkshire. So I would identify as North Notts, even though I have a lot of Yorkshire in me.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'm not. There was a lot of sort of sexual puns embedded in everything you just said. But do you want to just take our American listeners to where Yorkshire is in the world, and just a little bit about it?
Yeah, so northern England, on the sort of eastern side, very green, very rural. You're thinking rolling hills. You're thinking simple English folk with whippets and flat caps, and a hearty proud heritage of coal mining.
And home of the Yorkshire pudding, which goes with
home
every roast
of the Yorkshire pudding.
So you've got a young man, another young Yorkshireman. He's a hero in the sky. He's been shot down. Over Germany or over France?
Over northern France. And he's only 27 when this happens. And he was squadron leader with 607 Squadron, and he dies at his controls somewhere over the fields of the Pas-de-Calais. Now, George Fiddler had wanted to fly for as long as anyone who knew him could remember, and he started actually working at his father's building firm. but the sky was always something that he wanted to go to. He enlisted in the RAF in 1934 when he was just 21. So this is before the war had started. This is in that weird interwar period. He's not somebody who eventually gets scooped up by, war conscription or whatever. He is a keen wannabe pilot. And he did his training in Uxbridge and then spent the best part of the next few years abroad. He did 3 years in Egypt. He did spells in Cyprus, in India, and his superiors rated him early on as a sound and reliable pilot, excellent on ground subjects. I don't know what that means, being excellent on ground subjects as a pilot, but anyway,
so
he was very good.
The last thing you want.
Yeah,
I'd like you to be an expert of non-ground things, but anyway, I'm sure it's a good thing.
By 1938, the assessments had gone one better, and they started calling him exceptional, and they made him an acting flight lieutenant. And back home, as a result, in Great Ayton in North Yorkshire, he was a sort of minor celebrity, and he would fly over the village on some visits. He would do a loop-de-loop before landing in the field. These people lost their shit at that. It was absolutely thrilling.
Remember, they didn't have really proper televisions then, so...
or any televisions.
Yeah, sorry. They didn't have televisions then, so someone doing the loop-de-loop, loop-de-do, whatever.
You're going to go out and watch, aren't you?
You're going to go out and watch.
Obviously, war then broke out in September 1939, and George Fiddler went out to France with the British Expeditionary Force. They were the sort of highly trained types in World War One. Big moments including the Battle of Marne and Mons. And he joined 607 Squadron, and command came to him almost by accident and a bit too fast. He was the squadron's commanding officer, squadron leader Lance Smith, was killed over Dinant in Belgium. And so George, mid-20s, was promoted to lead his place in May 1940. This on the 16th of May 1940. He's all of a sudden promoted to become the commanding officer. So he'd only been commanding 607 Squadron for a matter of days, barely 3 days, when on patrol above Cambrai on the 19th, his Hurricane was one of the ones shot down by the Germans. Rubbish luck, especially for such an amazing and enthusiastic pilot who'd been at it for a good few years. And even worse for his mum. At home, just weeks earlier, George's sister Joan had died of a disease that she contracted by working as a radiographer at the military hospital. So when the telegram about George came to the house, the family's home sort of helper, cleaner, called Ivy, couldn't even bring herself to open it. She asked the local nurse to read it to her instead. And George's mum, Gertrude, was, in Ivy's words, distraught. She'd lost 2 of her children in a single month. God. Now, on the ground, the plane had crashed. British troops find his body. He was buried, and it was later moved by the French to a cemetery in the village of Barchy, about 20 miles from the crash site. And locals gave him a funeral ceremony. They tended to the grave for years, as is often the case in some of these parts. And George's mum, Gertrude, chose the words for the gravestone, taken from John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress, which is a big sort of Protestant book. So he passed over, and all the trumpets sounded for him on the other side. And that is where the story might have ended, except the body they buried wasn't him.
Oh my God. That's a great twist.
We will have more on this story in a moment. Any questions so far?
Well, I guess I was thinking about, it's not really a question, more an observation, but, it's really hard to imagine any of our generation taking on such responsibilities. Like, I know we're often mocked as millennials and now Gen Z even more, but the idea of being like, right, I'm not only going to sign up for war, but I'm going to be like leading a squadron in my mid-20s. I mean,
we make podcasts.
Useless. We'd make the war podcast.
Yeah. Like there's this 27-year-old flying a plane over the skies of France on an active war zone. We make podcasts, honestly.
And the thing is, planes haven't been around that long, and they were rickety and incredibly noisy, and you're flying into the darkness as these, gunshots come towards you. Yeah. I just can't even really imagine the terror, to be honest. There's been obviously a lot of great movies that sort of depict it. I'm blanking on some of their names, but I've just been struck on that point for quite a while. So this is nice to go into this person's
And if
life to really think about that.
if anyone could be bothered, do Google the image of the inside of a hurricane, because it is, as in the plane, not the weather phenomenon. Because I mean, like you say, they do look basic. It looks like some sort of kitchen appliance you're driving. Really basic stuff. So the idea of being shot at and then crashing on one of those, petrifying.
Oh, and that, you know, they were willing to do that for their country. And as you say, we were only a few months into the war. Europe had been wiped out in the First World War. It's just amazing. But I'm intrigued how it was the wrong body. I'm hopeful for Gertrude that her son's alive. I'm thinking Tarantino and someone posing as a German to get over the border. I'm thinking all these things.
I can tell you, it is not as good as that.
Damn. Okay. Well, what happened?
But let's definitely work up that idea. So we're leaving the early spring. Oh, we're leaving the spring of 1940, and we're going to 2006, Poppy. 2006.
Oh my God.
And a group of Franco-Belgian amateur historians with metal detectors, we love to see them, are out excavating what they know is where one of these crashed hurricanes are. George's hurricane, to be specific. But the wreckage that they dig out wasn't the right plane. It belonged to a guy called James Strickland, who had actually been shot at that day and managed to sort of crash land his plane and made it back to England alive and returned to flying, only to be killed just over a year later in August 1941 when his Spitfire crashed in Cornwall. His daughter Geraldine was born a month after his death. Sidebar point. But the main key thing is they find...
I wanted to know how he got back to England. What do you do if you crash land in France? How do you get back?
Went to hospital, was treated, went back to England, and then was like, yeah, I need to get straight back at it. And then unfortunately died. But the main point is these amateur historians are there looking at the numbers on the plane and going, this is not the right plane that we were expecting. Yeah. So it means the man who is buried in Bachy, which the locals attend to, which Gertrude, George's mother, had done the nice inscription for, certainly wasn't George Fidler. And when investigators went back over the records, they found that the authorities at the time had never accounted for 2 RAF sergeants who'd also died on the same day. There was no way to be sure whose body was in the grave because the sort of rules are, if there is a war grave there, you can't exhume them for testing. You just don't know. But obviously the mystery remains of where is George. You can search for him. Yeah. They changed the headstone quietly on that grave just to say it was an unknown airman. But where was George Fidler? So the answer came from an unlikely source. Engineers building a new waterway, the Seine-Nord Canal at Oisy-le-Verset, not far from where George's aircraft was last seen, were digging in the mud. Imagine this, you're building an enormous sort of construction project in northern France, and as you often do, a plane. Must be like when people are building in London and they find some Roman ruins, they think, oh shit.
I was just going to say, I have a friend who did archaeology, and he said that is basically his jobs, that if they come across some kind of ancient thing, making a Tesco's car park or whatever, they've got to bring in the archaeologist and then painstakingly wait and go, how long is this going to take? How many Romans are you going to dig up this time? And I thought, that's so terrible. The history, wouldn't you be excited? And he said it's a big pain in the ass for capitalism. So who knew? Yeah. So that's the situation. So they find this plane not far away.
And they not only do they find this plane in the mud, but it is a hurricane, and it is almost vertical in the ground, as if it has nosedived. And in the cockpit, this in 2006, in the cockpit, still strapped into his seat, still upright, was the body of the pilot who had been flying it. Wow. So a guy called Stephen, who was head of the recovery unit of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, was among the first at the scene, and he said, we're not expected to find any remains. The hurricane had more or less nosedived, and there was the pilot still in his straps, and the aircraft's serial number was easy to see and view. It was P3535. It was George Fidler's plane. They'd found it, and that was him. But proving the identity of the body was sort of a bit trickier. because George Fiddler didn't have any children. His brother Harold didn't have any children. His sister Joan didn't have any children. So there wasn't a DNA match they could do for a direct descendant. So instead, investigators from the Ministry of Defence's Joint Casualty and Compassionate Care Centre, who are sometimes referred to as the sort of war detectives, worked through the problem the other way around. They took DNA samples from the relatives of other pilots who were still unaccounted for, and eliminated them one by one. And when they'd worked through the entire list, one name remained on the list, and it was George Fiddler.
Wow.
The chief investigator said it had to be him. We were 100% certain. So the gravestone that was in Barshi had already been redesignated as an unknown airman, and the Ministry of Defence doesn't allow you to exhume graves for identification purposes. So we will never know who that is, but it's thought to be one of the other two flight sergeants who were lost that day. And then on the 19th of May this year, 2026, so 86 years to the day since George's Hurricane was shot down, he was finally given a proper burial. A bearer party of serving RAF personnel from RAF Halton carried his coffin, draped in a Union flag, through pouring rain to a grave at the London Cemetery and Extension at Longueval in northern France. And colleagues from his squadron who are serving today in 607 Squadron stood by, and a trumpeter from the band of the Royal Air Force College sounded notes over the grave, and a new headstone was waiting, and on it were the same words that his own mother had chosen more than 8 decades ago. So he passed over, and all the trumpets sounded for him on the other side. The RAF chaplain who was there said to have the privilege of being here on the anniversary of his death is extraordinary. He answered the call of his country, served with honour, and gave his life in the service of the nation. The plot next to him had Flight Engineer Sergeant Norman Harold Shergold of 61 Squadron. He was killed in June 1944, and he was just 19 years old. They also did a ceremony up in Great Ayton in his home village. They had a memorial service there. And this was just one of the more than 500,000 British servicemen and women from the two world wars who have been never found. And obviously construction work continues across northern France, and it is expected that over the years, more and more will surface, and that some, at least, will finally be brought home and properly buried.
Wow. 500,000.
Mm.
That's kind of amazing to think about, because I suppose it speaks to, obviously, they didn't have DNA. Also, it was like really loads of chaos. But again, the scale of it is really hard for us to imagine. 500,000 people just gone.
And can I do a sort of sidebar coda to all of this on the
Please.
subject of bodies? Because I was reading a book a few months ago, and then reading all of that reminded me of this story. So that was the Second World War. And, you know, you think of the issues of the amount of war dead, and it's sort of impossible to identify everybody and account for everybody. There's a very good book called The Age of Illusion by Ronald Blythe. He's now dead, but he wrote it about the interwar period. So Britain in the 20s and 30s, 1919 to 1940, which he sort of terms as being a period where everyone went a bit mad. Just all these mad things happened because it was the interwar period. You know, they had all sort of, Amelia Earhart. There was Lawrence of Arabia signing back up into the RAF. There's this fabulous story about a vicar who ends up sort of chasing all these showgirls in Piccadilly and ends up having to join the circus and is mauled by a lion. There's just like mad stories that happen.
I'm obsessed with this era. I've done 3 podcasts around this era, and I'm very obsessed. So pushing it an open door, because I think it gave me an image of what maybe post-COVID was going to be like, because you had all these, there's a kind of like, you know, they believe that flappers and all that came out of people being like, you're not dead, let's party, let's drink gin cocktails all night and be flapper girls, because like we just survived the war. But it didn't really happen. There wasn't like a big party. Everyone was just a bit like fed up and chubby and had learned to make bread. It was a very different shared experience.
But this guy, Ronald Blythe, in his book, one of the first stories he does is, you know, sort of typifying sort of how mad the whole period was, is actually how they came up with the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, which is currently in Westminster Abbey. Obviously quite a sort of novel idea.
Yeah.
And how's this for, you know, they finally realised, okay, we need to do something to mark Armistice Day. This after the end of the First World War, and there's this idea of doing a minute's silence, which the king quite likes the idea of. Someone mentions that happening somewhere else; they're keen on that. And then they come up with the idea of having an unknown tomb of an unknown soldier to sort of signify and represent all of the soldiers who have been lost. To make sure that they found a body, and it was one that literally they knew that no one would know who that was. The authorities in France were asked to exhume the bodies of 6 anonymous soldiers who, as far as it could be judged, had been killed in the early fighting. And on the afternoon of November the 6th, this is in 1920, 6 small working parties, each carrying tools and a plain coffin, each commanded by a subaltern, set out to the 6 main battlefields of the First World War, this is. And a nameless corpse was chosen from the forest of rough crosses marked unknown, which sprouted from these various parts. The bodies were sealed in coffins near the spots where they were found and driven back separately in 6 motor ambulances to an army hut not far from Ypres. Here, they were received by a clergyman. They were laid side by side, and an officer who had never been inside the hut was blindfolded, led into the room, and the first coffin he touched was chosen. And Ronald Blythe sort of describes this beautifully. He says, "And so was chosen the poor nameless flesh which would be followed through the streets of London by the King Emperor on foot and interred with every pomp and dignity known to the state in Westminster Abbey." That's how they picked that body.
I'm confused, if I'm honest. I know about the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, so there is a real interned person.
In Westminster Abbey, yeah.
And Westminster Abbey is obviously where royals and monarchs, so it's like a real honour to go
Yeah.
there. So what they did was...
Dickens is there.
Dickens, yeah, in Poets' Corner. Although I'm like, was he a poet? I was almost like...
Yeah, good point, actually.
Bit weird. I'm like, should be Novelist's Corner. But anyway, that was on the New Yorker crossword. What was the name of the Dickens Corner? So, and then I got into a loop about this. But the blindfold...
She's so New York, ladies and gentlemen.
She does a New Yorker crossword, only when it's the easy one. Then they blindfold him to give a sense of like lucky dip because it's so fortunate.
Yeah. Or just, so it's like there's no way of knowing... okay, we're going to make it that person. So it's like, let's pick some unknown bodies from 6 different battlefields.
Of it.
I think so. And also, I guess, for the kind of lucky dip element, as you say as well.
It's just so weird. It's so un-English. It's sort of like more like how they pick the Dalai Lama and he's got to remember the items that belong to them and all that. Well, there you go. That's some good trivia right there. Well,
exactly. It was a sort of Wargrave special, but it's only because, I mean, you would like that book. It's called The Age of Illusion by Ronald Blythe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not only how one body was identified, but that's how the unknown soldier was identified as a little sort of coda for you.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to Westminster Abbey and look at that section with a whole new perspective.
How nervous would you be if you were the officer who was blindfolded and had to pick them? You'd be like, it'd be such a stress. Anyway,
why would you? I'd just be like, why am I doing this? This is so weird. Now the amuse-bouche, no one dies. But it is quite horrible. It's a story that's been in the...
You don't have to promise horror. You don't have to promise death. We're fine with that. That's okay.
No, I'm saying there's no death, which is the upside.
No, I know.
Really
but you said it as if you were sort of letting me down. You were like, but it is horrible. Don't worry.
It's true. Don't worry. It's scarring. In the United States of America, where I live, this has been a very big story. So I'm only going to say what we know about it so far. But of course, as more emerges, we could revisit it. It's been kind of called a house of horrors. So this takes place in southern Ohio, in a village called the village of Hamden, Vinton County. It's got a population of less than 1,000. And there's a kind of 1-bedroom house on a road next to a railroad embankment. And it was visible from the road and it does have neighbors, but it's got quite a lot of trees and bush around it, which becomes relevant later. But Tuesday, June 30th of this year, sheriff's deputies go to the house to serve a warrant for a totally unrelated reason. And, you know, there's still details to emerge about what the connection is to that adult, but the police go there to serve this. And what they find is 16 children aged 18 months to 18 years living in the house with 4 adults, 2 parents and 2 grandparents. And most of these children have been confined to a single room, roughly 12 feet by 12 feet. And they've been there for up to 4 years. The kind of officers that we've seen quoted on the press here talk about human waste all around. They made, specifics to say there were no cages. But I think that's because people were kind of wondering how you could even entrap that many people in a small room. The Attorney General, Andy Wilson, said the evidence is beyond comprehension, said if they'd waited even one more day, there was a real chance they'd be dealing with dead children. The county sheriff, Ryan Kane, said, livestock on most farms are kept in better conditions. And he said it was absolutely disgusting. So 7 kids were taken to hospitals, 2 were airlifted because it was so urgent, and 1 was in critical condition. But it was also like the condition they were found in raises questions about how they were living. Some of them couldn't speak. One 18-year-old reportedly couldn't write his own name. And real questions about how no one was able to notice this emerges. If they've got neighbors, it's visible from the road, like, couldn't they see there were kids in there? But like the weird details are very mysterious. The family had moved around southern Ohio for over 20 years, like kind of off with grid, like not leaving a paper trail. There's no medical records, no government paperwork. No kids were ever enrolled in the school. And it seems like they've really been able to slip under the radar. And then what sort of emerged is you've got Gary Siders Jr., who's the dad, Elizabeth Siders, who's the mum, and then the grandparents, Gary Siders Sr. and Christine Siders. And they were all arrested and charged with felony endangerment of children and also serious physical harm. And, they all pled not guilty. Bond was set at $300K. But what it kind of exposes, and like with all crime stories, I'm always interested, like not in just the gratuitous horror of it, but like what it can tell you. And what it reveals is that when they got married, he was 18 and the woman was only 15. There's suspicion that she might have been having children as young as 13. This is a really dark case. The children are now in temporary custody. And there's going to be continued kind of investigations. But I just found it kind of interesting to think about America as this vast place where, homeschooling and things like that it continues to be quite controversial. But the idea of this sort of pack of humans being able to move and not be discovered and live in a kind of prison is obviously quite shocking. So we'll wait and see what emerges about this kind of house of horrors they were living in.
Has there been lots of, as you mentioned, lots of attention and commentary about it in the US? I mean, it's such a it's something you immediately want to talk about, ask more questions about. I mean, your TikToks must have been popping off about it.
They were popping off. I think it was a lot of mug shots of the husband and wife and wondering, like, is she a victim herself, or like, are they both involved in it? Is it like a Fred and Rose West? Like, I think when there's couples or multiple adults, you sort of wonder, is it folie à deux, or this is folie à un, deux, trois, quatre?
It's beyond your French.
Is it quatre? I'm suddenly confused because it's Spanish. Oh, quatre. Okay, wait.
Yeah. Folie à quatre.
I just moved to Spanish. I was like, un, deux, trois, quatre, cinco, six. Like, it's just...
Bienvenue à Strangely. Je m'appelle Luc.
It's kind of folie à quatre because you've got all 4 of them complicit. So I think people are wondering what the hell the dynamic is and whether there's a leader. Is it a cult thing? Like, what is going on?
Yeah. Strangely at alwaystruecrime.com is our email address if you've got any stories like that you would like to send us, or things that you think we should be talking about on the podcast. You might have seen some bonkers story from your neck of the woods. Do share it with us. Shout out to the person who commented on Apple Podcasts too. I mean, what did he exactly say, Poppy? Lovely voice.
Lovely, sexy voice, I think it said. And it also said something about how we share a birthday, but they were born in 1970. So I just want to confirm that we are not 56 years old, unfortunately. but actually...
We're both 25. Get over it.
This has been lovely, as always. I'll see you next week.
See you next week.